Bullies mocked a waitress, then froze when they learned her husband owned the restaurant. It was a bustling Friday evening at a high-end restaurant where every table was filled, the sound of laughter mingling with the clinking of glasses and the hum of conversations. The aroma of freshly seared steak drifted through the air as waiters hurried from one corner to another. But in the midst of it all, one waitress stood out. Not because she wanted to, but because of the way a particular group treated her. She moved swiftly, her tray balanced perfectly, her uniform spotless, her smile polite yet faint. Her eyes showed the weariness of someone used to long shifts, yet her composure was unshaken. At a corner table sat 4 wealthy regulars, a trio of men in designer suits and a woman glittering with jewelry. Their laughter was sharp, not out of joy but arrogance. The moment the waitress approached, their grins twisted into sneers. One man leaned back in his chair and said loudly, "Careful, sweetheart. Don't trip again. I can't afford another dry cleaning bill." The others laughed cruelly, their voices dripping with mockery. The woman flicked her diamond bracelet and added, "Maybe if she worked as hard as she frowns, she'd earn a real job." Their words cut deep, but the waitress didn't flinch. She simply nodded, murmuring, "I'll be right back with your drinks, sir," before turning away, her hands trembling slightly. She had faced customers like them before, entitled, rude, believing kindness meant weakness. But tonight felt different. Every insult hit harder because the place they were disrespecting wasn't just a restaurant. It was home. It was her husband's dream, the one they had built together from nothing but grit and sacrifice. Every plate she served carried pride. Every smile was part of a story they had fought for. Behind the glass wall of the office upstairs, her husband, the restaurant's owner, was reviewing security footage, unaware that his wife had taken an extra shift to help cover for a sick employee. When he noticed the familiar figure being mocked, his face darkened. He watched the way she swallowed her pain with grace, the way those customers treated her as if she were invisible. And in that moment, he decided the humiliation wouldn't go unanswered. Back on the floor, the waitress continued her rounds, her heart pounding but her face calm. She refused to stoop to their level. What those bullies didn't know was that the woman they belittled held the same keys that opened every door in that building. And soon, their laughter would fade when they discovered that the waitress they mocked wasn't just another server. She was the co-owner of the restaurant they bragged about dining in. The night grew longer, and the laughter at the corner table only got louder. The group of arrogant diners seemed determined to break the waitress's calm. They snapped their fingers to summon her like she was invisible, rolling their eyes every time she appeared. When she brought out their meals with practiced grace, one man smirked and said, "This steak looks overcooked. Maybe you should stick to washing dishes." His friends erupted into laughter while she stood silently, holding her tray steady even though her hands trembled. She apologized politely and offered to have it redone, her tone so composed it almost unsettled them. But they weren't done yet. Another man leaned back in his chair, swirling his drink, and said, "I bet she's used to this, serving people better than her." The woman at the table added cruelly, "Oh please, she's probably only here because her husband left her." That comment stung, but the waitress swallowed her pride, gave a small nod, and walked away. As she moved behind the counter, a young busboy whispered, "You want me to tell the manager? They shouldn't talk to you like that." She smiled faintly and shook her head. "No, it's fine. I can handle it." Her voice was soft but carried quiet strength. What those bullies didn't know was that she had dealt with far worse and had learned that dignity could silence cruelty better than words ever could. She wasn't just a waitress working for tips. She was the backbone of the place, the heart that kept it running smoothly. Meanwhile, in a private office upstairs, the restaurant's true owner was watching everything unfold through the security cameras. He had been reviewing accounts when his eyes caught sight of the familiar figure in the server's uniform. His expression hardened as he saw how that group mocked her, humiliated her, and treated her like she didn't belong. They didn't know who she was. His wife, his partner, the woman who had helped him build this restaurant from scratch when they had nothing but faith and determination. Every insult they threw at her burned in his chest. He leaned forward in his chair, his jaw tight but his eyes calm. Picking up his phone, he called the floor manager. "Prepare the VIP suite," he said quietly, "and send that corner table up when I say so." He ended the call and looked back at the screen. His wife continued to serve with grace, not knowing that justice was already on its way. What those bullies thought was a game of mockery was about to turn into a moment they would never forget. The waitress returned to the table with the same calm smile she had worn all evening. Though her patience was wearing thin, the group of diners didn't even look at her when she asked softly if they would like dessert. The loudest man leaned back in his chair and waved his hand dismissively, saying, "No, sweetheart, you've done enough tonight. Maybe send someone who actually knows what they're doing." His friends laughed under their breath, their arrogance filling the space like an unpleasant scent. She stood there for a brief moment, keeping her head bowed, refusing to let her emotions show. But before she could turn to leave, a deep, firm voice cut through the noise, silencing the entire table in an instant. "Is there a problem with my staff?" the voice asked. Every head turned toward the entrance of the dining area, where a tall man in a tailored suit stood. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried an authority that made even the most confident of people shrink. The group's laughter died on their lips. The man who had mocked the waitress the most stammered, "No, sir, we were just talking. No problem at all." The owner stepped closer, his gaze fixed on them. "Because from what I saw on the security cameras," he said evenly, "you weren't just criticizing the service. You were humiliating my wife." For a moment, there was complete silence. The woman at the table blinked, her painted smile faltering. "Your wife?" she asked weakly, glancing at the waitress who now stood straighter, her hands clasped in front of her. The owner nodded slowly. "Yes, the woman you mocked, insulted, and disrespected. She runs this floor better than anyone I know. She helped me build this restaurant from nothing. Every detail you see here exists because of her." His voice didn't rise, but the quiet fury behind his words made everyone at the table shift uncomfortably. The waitress said nothing. She didn't have to. The way she stood beside her husband, calm and composed, spoke louder than any revenge ever could. The same people who had laughed at her minutes ago now sat frozen, their arrogance dissolving into shame. The man who had made the cruelest jokes tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "Sir, we didn't know." The owner cut him off firmly. "That's exactly the point. You never know who you're speaking to. Yet, respect should never depend on status." He looked around the table once more, then turned to his wife with a gentle nod. "You've done your job perfectly tonight," he said softly. And in that moment, every person in the restaurant knew that the real power didn't lie in wealth or titles. It lay in grace, dignity, and knowing when to stay silent. The restaurant had gone quiet after the owner's words, the kind of silence that follows a storm. The bullies sat frozen in their seats, their confidence shattered, their laughter gone. The owner's voice remained calm, yet every word carried a weight that pressed against the air. He looked at them with controlled authority and said, "In this place, respect isn't optional. It's the main course." The guests around them could feel the message behind those words. It wasn't just about the waitress anymore. It was about every person who had ever been treated like they were invisible. He took a step closer and continued, "Your meal is on the house, but you are not welcome here again." His tone wasn't angry, just certain, final. The group tried to speak, their excuses fumbling out in broken sentences, but the restaurant staff had already moved toward the table. The manager appeared at his side and a pair of security guards stood ready, waiting for a simple nod. The owner didn't have to raise his voice or argue. His quiet strength said everything. As the group stood up awkwardly, the once arrogant diners could feel the eyes of the entire restaurant on them. People who had been silent earlier now began to clap softly. First a few hands, then the sound spread like a wave, growing louder until it filled the room. The clapping wasn't just for the owner. It was for the waitress who had faced cruelty with grace, for the quiet dignity she had shown when others had chosen mockery. The bullies hurried toward the exit, their heads down, faces red with shame. The moment the door closed behind them, the restaurant returned to a gentle hum, though the energy had shifted, warmer, prouder, lighter. The waitress turned to her husband, relief flickering across her face. He looked at her with soft eyes and said quietly, "You handled that better than anyone else could." She smiled faintly, her voice calm but full of meaning. "I just did what we always do. Serve with grace, even when others don't deserve it." He reached for her hand, and for a moment they simply stood together, surrounded by the place they had built with love and effort. Later that night, when the restaurant finally emptied and the lights dimmed, she stood by the window, looking out at the street glistening under the streetlights. For the first time in a long while, she felt something deeper than relief. She felt proud, not because her husband had defended her, but because she had held her head high and stayed kind when others tried to pull her down. Somewhere out there, those bullies were still thinking about that night, the moment they learned a simple truth they would never forget. Never judge the person serving your table, because sometimes they own the whole place.